He was funny. He was athletic. He was smart. He loved his family. He was just a joy to be around.
He was tall. He was good looking. He came from a very good household. He was loved sports, got involved into sports from a very young age. And he loved sports through his whole life.
The only thing I ever wanted to do was be a mom. And having him was truly a dream come true. I remember after having him driving in the car and just feeling this sense of peace that, wow, I'm so blessed. I have such a great family and a beautiful child, and he was just a great kid. He was so athletic. He played every sport he could think of, and he was so determined.
If he wanted to be the quarterback, he figured out a way to be a quarterback. And he stayed quarterback for pretty much every team that he was on.
This was his jersey. He absolutely loved the Texas Longhorns. And I had a friend that made his shirt into a pillow for me. But loved sports, loved watching sports. That's something he and I would do together, is we would go to Astros games or any kind of game that we could go to together and hang out and just have a good time.
He didn't even drink alcohol. And if he did, he might have a couple of times here and there, but never suspected any kind of drug usage at all. And after living with an addict, you can figure out when somebody's doing drugs within the first few seconds of meeting him. And looking back on it now, he wasn't doing drugs in high school. I know that. And went to college, went to Texas State in San Marcos. And he was, very happy to go. Lived in the dorms. His first freshman year, we'd go visit him and see him, and never had any kind of inclination that we thought he was doing any kind of drugs, maybe drinking some, but college kids do that.
Things did change when he went to college. He would have loved to go to UT, but apparently he didn't love school enough to get the grades to go in. But so he went to Texas State, which is the same school that I went to. My sister, my brother, and I all went to, it was Southwest Texas at the time. And then I have a nephew that was there. So he went to Texas State, and we dropped him off at school. He was happy and healthy. And throughout that, really not even the first year, things seemed okay the first year. It was by a sophomore year. Things just started not really adding up. And he was asking for lots of money. And we didn't really know what was going on.
I remember how we found out he was doing drugs. We got a call from his cousin, Zachary, who was going to college with him. He was the same age he was. And he was going to college with him, and they were working together. Zachary had got him a job on a moving crew, moving people out of their apartments around town, a moving crew. And he came to the conclusion, I guess just from conversation during their jobs, that Mason was doing methamphetamine.
And so we talked with him and asked him, and basically said, you need to come home. And he didn't want to come home. And we're like, well, then if you don't want to come home, then you need to do some kind of counseling. And so we found a counselor that dealt with drug use in San Marcos, and he started going to that counselor.
I think he just liked doing the drugs because they make you feel good until they stop working. And you have to have more, and you have to have more, and you have to have more. And then it gets to a point to where you don't do them to get high, you just do them to be normal.
We had him on Life 360, so we knew where he was going at all times. And he never complained about any of that. But he called me one day and said his phone had been stolen. This was like the second time. And just this things just didn't add up and didn't sound right. And my husband and I started talking, and I was like, you know what? We need to go get him.
We decided at that point we got to go down and remove him from that environment. One, for, the drugs, could kill you, and two, the legal aspects of it. We didn't want him to get involved in any kind of legalities with the police, and screw up his life as it would have.
He still went to school. It was, COVID had happened, so lots of things were online. So he was able to go to school, and we ended up putting him in a drug rehab, an outpatient drug rehab. And he did that for a while. He continued to do drugs. The day before he was supposed to go back to school, he called me at work and asked what we were having for dinner. He'd call me every day and ask me what was for dinner. And I said, I don't know, what do you want? And he said, I think lasagna. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I'll have to stop at the store. He's like, no, I want tacos. I was like, okay. So I stopped at the store. I usually tutored after work, but I didn't that day. And I stopped at the store, bought the stuff we needed, and came home. And when I walked in the door, I could hear him, like this weird noise. He liked to go lay in our room because we could make our room really cold and watch TV. And he was laying in my husband and mine's room, and I could hear this weird noise. And I was like, Mason, stop. And he didn't respond, and I went in there and found him unresponsive. And so I called 911, and they had me get him off the bed. He's 6'3" and 200 pounds. Get him off the bed and start doing CPR on him. And they came and got him back with Narcan. We put him into rehab again. And, every time, he never fought us. We never had, like you think of kids that are doing drugs are just disrespectful and mean. And, he never took things from our house and pawned anything. He never argued with us. We're like, you've got to go to rehab. And he'd be like, okay. He knew this wasn't the life he wanted.
He had overdosed on heroin, what we believed to be heroin. And then we're like, no, there's no way you can go back. You can't handle this, He did a lot of different types of drugs, but when he got into the heroin phase is when it got real bad.
The last time he went to rehab was in December of last year, so a year ago, and he ended up being there 90 days. And we told him, this time you can't come home. We just can't have you come home. You're going to have to go to a sober living. And so he found a sober living in the Heights, and he didn't have a vehicle. And he went to the sober living, and he was looking for a job. And he was there a month and a half.
So at this point in time, he's living in that sober living, and I'm going to I had a cardiologist appointment. It was about 9:30 that morning on a Wednesday, I remember. And he had texted me and said, hey, Dad, make sure you come here. I have my doctor's appointment today. I'll be waiting on you. It's about 9:30. So I texted him back and said, okay, I'll be there. Had taken off work that day, too. And I drove up there to get him, and when I pulled into the parking lot, I was going to text him I was there, but the gentleman that ran the rehab facility walked out and told me that Mason was gone and that an ambulance had taken him away, and that he had found him unconscious in his room.
Wednesday, I was at work, and I was in the middle of working, and I got a unknown call. I just put the phone down, and then I got up, and I saw Memorial Hermann was calling, and I answered the phone, and they said, told me that my son was in the hospital, and that someone needed to come to the hospital. And so I knew then.
Once I got to the hospital, I remember going to the check-in station there. A gentleman was working. I told him who I was there. I was seeing Mason Holmberg. He kind of looked at me, gave me a strange look, and said, right then I knew. And then he said, well, the doctor says here you need to go to the chapel.
So I got there with my friend, and we went in there to the chapel and waited, and a lady came in and told us that he had passed away.
And we walked from there and went to go see him on the gurney. And there he was. That was our Mason laying there dead.
No parent should have to do that. It was a nightmare. It still is. On the way back from the hospital, we were trying to figure out what happened. We called the sober living, and the guy that was there said that he had stayed up all night with Mason because Mason said he was having cravings, and he and another guy had stayed up all night with him, talking him through it and trying to help him, and told him, okay, we'll go to a meeting together in the morning. And it just didn't. I believe at 10 o'clock, Mason texted my husband and said, hey, Dad, when are you going to be here? And at 11 o'clock, he was dead. So,
We were given his clothes to take with us home. And we knew about little pockets he had and said, well, just search that shorts he was wearing. And a little blue pill in a little baggie popped up.
we looked up what kind of pill that was. It was Oxy. And so we know it was Oxy. And if he took an Oxy, he would be alive, right? So we knew it had to have fentanyl in it. Mason was very aware of what fentanyl was. He would talk to us about it. Mason was never shy about sharing his struggles with us. We had an open line of communication with him.
It's so addictive. Me and you sitting here thinking, man, if we knew something that was going to kill you, why can't we just stop? You can't. Your mind won't. It overrides everything.
I think when he went to college, he just started hanging around with some people, and he thought he was smarter than the drugs, and he could beat it, that he wouldn't get addicted, that he did it because it made him feel less anxiety. He did have some anxiety, and that he could talk to people and not feel so self-conscious. And that's why I think he initially got into it. But you don't know, if you're going to be an addict or not.
It's not like back in the day when, you used to experiment in college or high school. This drug is a poison, and this drug will kill you, and you don't know when that's going to happen. Just depending on whoever's making this drug and whatever cow pasture they're sitting in, pressing out these pills, they're going to put just a little bit too much in one pill.
Fentanyl kills, and it's everywhere. And you cannot even try anything. It's not like it was when we were kids. It's not like it was 10 years ago, where if you're in high school or college and you decide to experiment with something, you can't, because it'll kill you. It'll literally kill you. Or if it doesn't kill you the first time, if you become an addict, you will definitely die from it. We had a wonderful son with a lot of potential, and it destroyed his life.